Looks like we're pretty good. All right, thank you everybody for joining us today to find out what's the buzz around ICEAA's new software cost estimating certification, and more specifically, the CEBoK-S. Today we have Carol Deckers and Kevin McKeel are going to go through what there is to know about CEBoK-S and the corresponding certification. If you have questions for our panelists, please put those in the chat and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. If for some reason we don't have time to get to your question, we'll pass them along and you can take them offline. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to our presenters.
Thanks, Megan. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Carol Deckers. I'm on the ICEAA Board of Directors, and I was the lead author for the CEBoK-S. And my co-presenter here is Kevin McKeel, who has won numerous ICEAA awards, I think as best presenter. And the two of us did a presentation back a couple of months ago, and we won the Washington, D.C. chapter presenters of the year. So this is a modified version of that. So welcome, glad you're here, and let's get into it. So I'm going to do a real brief introduction. I've got 20 to 30 years in software development, estimation, measurement. I've been on the ISO standards delegation to international standards since 1994, and representing measurement and things like that, where we have 65 countries that participate in creating software engineering standards. I'm a PMP, I'm a certified Scrum Master, lead author of the CEBoK-S. I hold a number of different designations, and I'm an independent consultant, speaker, author, instructor, and frequent speaker at ITCast, ICEAA, IFPUG, Project Management, Agile Software Development Conferences, and my email is below. And Kevin.
Hello, so I'm Kevin McKeel. I want to first welcome everyone here and thanks for attending. I see a lot of people I know pretty well, Babu, Brian, Dan French, some others. First of all, I want to thank Dan because he's letting me speak with work. I give a presentation with Carol. Anyone who goes to ICEAA knows that Carol and Dan give these great presentations on functional size measurement and other topics. So I'll do the best I can, but with Carol, who's going to do most of the presentation. So you can see my credentials. I've been doing software estimation for far too long. I did actually start off with NavAir as kind of your basic, hardware estimator. So I got kind of that background, and then got the SCEC that we're going to be talking about recently. Did get the 2020-21 ICEAA technical achievement related to automated software measurement, which we're not really going to get into here. And I enjoy speaking to you folks at various conferences.
Great, thanks, Kevin.
Okay, so I'm going to go through a few slides, and then I'll turn it over to Carol. We're actually going to dive into some technical content that you would get into if you were studying for the exam, and then we'll close with actually how to get the software certification. We really want this as a way to advertise and promote and explain what the software cost estimating certification is. Carol will get into CEBoK-S. We'll give an overview, some of the curriculum, and then we'll talk about the certification, the process, certainly the benefits that we see in it, and we're interested in, as much as this can be collaborative, which is difficult in this environment, we'll have a Q&A session. So this is a CEBoK-S a background. You can kind of see a pyramid. And it basically is a collaborative development of over 10 years. Carol was heavily involved in it. There are over 200 sources. It's whether you take the test or not. Totally recommend everyone to try to get a copy of it, and some really great content. It's a specialized extension of the ICEAA cost estimating book of knowledge, specifically for software, and it's an evolving body of knowledge. And I want to thank, as you all know, you should know, Carol is the lead author of CEBoK-S, so we're definitely hearing from the subject matter expert today.
I want to say a couple of things here. One is I want to give a shout out to people that may or may not realize that they were part of this, or who may know they were part of it originally. As Kevin said, it was like a 10-year project, and there were people from the International Function Point Users Group, IFPUG, involved. There were people from NESMA, which was the Netherlands Software Measurement Association, from Cosmic. I've even got people that were involved from the Agile Manifesto. Alistair Coburn reviewed things for me, especially on the Agile parts. And we had people from different commercial organizations who were part of it. People from Unison, people from QSM, people from Gallereth, and people from the Kokomo suite of experts. So there were a lot of different people involved. And the original start was to kind of develop PowerPoint slides. And then in 2019, 2020, the ICEAA board said, you know what? We've got a memorandum of understanding and an agreement to take the Defense Acquisition University 5-day established curriculum on software cost estimation. So that's the thing that's at the very top. And so we got 400 PowerPoint slides that were kind of best in class from Defense Acquisition University, but a lot of it was defense or federal government centric. And we really wanted to make it international. So we took the DAU base, and my job originally was just to demilitarize it. And it ended up to be a much, much larger 18-month job. So we engaged commercial tool vendors, cost estimating guidebooks. That's where some of the 200 sources came from. Industry groups, we had a lot of people involved, ICEAA board and committees, industry experts globally, and published works. I had 2 boxes of published books by Capers Jones, Dick Stutzky, Barry Beam, you name it, IFPUG books that were available to me that I didn't actually have to go out and purchase. So that was kind of a benefit to ICEAA, that I could just go and pull it out of those works. We had research and academia, and as I said, more than 200 sources. So the CEBoK-S itself has 800 pages now. It's the most extensive functional size measurement case study that's around, that uses all of the different measures. So even beyond just certification, this is kind of a compilation and a collaborative group of all these different best sources from around the world and from all across the industry. And there's tons and tons of references that are not necessarily part of our certification exam.
Okay, so CEBoK-S in 30 seconds. Coming from the perspective of a software estimator, it's important to recognize that software estimation is non-trivial. It grows in importance. Software dominates software-intensive programs. It also dominates hardware programs in many ways. It is a major cost driver. As Carol mentioned, so what you get in CEBoK-S is 9 easy to digest PowerPoints that she mentioned, the 800-page plus. So you will get into the process, how to do an estimate. We'll talk about COTS. We'll talk about O&M. We'll talk about techniques. We'll differentiate Agile from waterfall, that sort of thing. Basically, everything you need to do to understand software. I will also point out you do not need to be into functional size measurement. You do not have to count function points. Now, certainly there are times that you need to do that when you're building an estimator. It certainly helps, and maybe you need to bring out a SME to do that work, or a tool even. But what Carol has created within CEBoK-S is telling you it's a how-to-do guide. For everyone on the call is probably familiar with the GAO cost guide that has 12 steps to build an estimate. It goes through all the case studies, kind of has a flavor of that. And I really think it'll stand the test of time. It's something people are going to reference when they're building out software estimates. Anyway, so as I mentioned, it provides a lot of guidance. And then it will give you tips and techniques to build estimates and to improve your proficiency as a software cost estimator. And then finally, there is, of course, the reason why most of us are here is to hear about the certification, the ICEAA software cost estimating certification. I have a hard time saying it, SCEC, so I'll just say it by name. So we'll get more into the software cost estimating certification in a few slides.
And I think it's important too, Kevin, that this sits on top of the cost estimating body of knowledge. So what we have not done is we have not repeated statistical analysis techniques. We have not repeated how to normalize data. We've not spent a lot of time talking about current year, base year, and things like that. Anything that is covered already in the cost estimation body of knowledge is considered to be kind of prerequisite knowledge. Now, that's not to say that you're not going to be able to pass the SCEC just knowing measurement techniques and things, because that's important. But it's really intended to be kind of a hand-in-hand joint set of information. And we've got way more stuff in the CEBoK-S materials than are going to be tested. And when we take a look at what is actually tested, it is those unique parts. So if you're a software cost estimator or a cost estimator, and somebody gives you a function point count or a lines of code count, what are the questions that you should be asking to get the context and know what those counts or those estimates actually mean?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think pairing with the CCEA, I've done it, so I'm a little bit biased, but I think that's a good approach. You're going to get people like myself that come from cost estimation. You're going to get people, for instance, Carol would be an example, that come from basically software sizing, functional size measurements, kind of a blend of the two. So what CEBoK-S does is, as we said, it provide guidance for the estimator to build cost schedule estimates, developing, procuring, sustaining software. Certainly, as we evolve, we know that there's a lot more COTS, SAS, IAS tools out there, so that's definitely a big part of it. CEBoK-S does not endorse any particular sizing methodology, or commercial tool vendor. We have a slide today. We're going to talk about true planning, SEER tools, ACID, other tools. It gets into the different tools you can use, but it doesn't actually it doesn't pick a horse, so to speak. It's a wide approach, basically, to serve the entire industry, not a specific niche within it. And it does provide guidance. I think at this point, I turn it over to Carol.
So we intended this. The original terms of reference, there was a formal CEBoK-S terms of reference that was written up in 2020 before I was contracted to actually lead the effort. And we designed it so that it would be members of the software acquisition communities globally.
Maybe Carol's Wi-Fi dropped out. Kevin, can you jump back in? There we go.
Okay, I think this is where we were. So who is this far? When Carol jumps in, she can help out.
She's making her way back on, so you shouldn't be
Okay.
in the hot seat.
Okay, so it's for the software acquisition community globally. So this could be contracting officers, it could be project managers, also within the OEMs that are building their own estimates, cost analysts who prepare, validate, review software estimates by prime subcontractors. You may want to do a cross check on your own. Consultants like myself and Carol, certainly for the C-suite executives, and also students or professors who kind of want to know, what is software estimating? Might it be something I want to make a career out of? So we have, as Carol mentioned, there are 9 different presentations. So we have an intro, software development paradigms. That's going to get into the agile waterfall issue. A 5-step estimation process. We mentioned, or I mentioned, GAO guide has 12 steps, so we've condensed that. We look at custom software development. That's sort of the traditional cost, where developers are given a set of requirements, they code, build, test. Software sustainment is really a big issue. We all know that O&M cost on all programs are upwards of 70% of the total cost of the program. Very important to understand, what does that mean? Is there you're doing upgrades, you're doing patches. If it's a COTS tool, you're probably paying an annual maintenance fee, et cetera. And then procured software, of course, that's COTS or SAS. And then there's specific modules for sizing. That's functional size measurement, coming from size from a set of requirements. Productivity, when I break software estimating down, I think about it, it's the software size and it's a delivery rate. What is that productivity? How quickly can software be built? And there's always a lot involved that when you're building an estimate. And then the commercial estimation models, I touched on those earlier, true planning, SEER, SLIM, etc. Carol, you back or no?
I don't see her back yet, but
All right. So we'll keep pressing on. So these are actually slides from CEBoK-S, and we'll go through them. So some of the terminology, software development paradigm. So I think of this as agile or waterfall. We think about predictive or plan driven. Plan driven would be waterfall, predictive being agile, and that's kind of how the approach to software is being built. They're different inside of that. There's different development methods. There's waterfall, Scrum, Kanban, SAFe, hybrid. I always assume hybrid for government estimation projects if I don't have any better information. Think about that as the SDLC. We talked about cost estimating models. Since I do a lot of parametric modeling, this is probably my level of familiarity. So just some ideas. We have true planning, SEER SIM, SLIM, COCOMO. Those are the leading tools. And then your cost estimating structure. What are you estimating within that software estimate? It's a design, build, code. It could be the license purchase and the O&M, et cetera. This is explained in one of the lessons, and Carol and the team looked at DAU, different work breakdown structures within GAO and CEBoK. We also talk about different techniques. So we're going to talk about parametric. That's near and dear to most software estimators. Analogy, engineering buildup, extrapolation from actuals, expert opinion. Within this group here, I don't think I need to explain the differences in those techniques, but we do get into all of those. So this just kind of gives an idea of where software changed from how it was built. So go back to the 70s and 80s, my childhood. Wasn't really into software back then, but that this was more coding and fixing, building from a set of requirements. We were not using COTS at this point. It was mostly waterfall, or you might have other techniques where spiral, incremental, evolutionary, where you'd get the product out quicker. Basically, you were given a set of requirements, a spec, build the software, and then deliver it. And then by the 90s, we had a lot of other different terminology. This is getting close to the Agile Manifesto. We had Scrum, extreme programming, iterative. They're basically ways to push products out to the end user quicker, get their feedback, make changes. And then after the Agile Manifesto, what we think about this is the Agile world of today. Scaled Agile framework. I recommend anyone that's interested in software Googling that and looking at their framework. That basically transitioned into DevOps and DevSecOps that merge security, information security, and O&M within development, because in often cases that it's the same team that's doing all that within Agile, which is different than the sort of the traditional way. So it's important to understand that the different processes, it's not going to impact the size. The size is what it is, but it will impact the productivity. And I already touched on DevSecOps.
Hey, Kevin, it's Carol. I am back.
Okay.
And I think this is really, truly an on-the-fly agile manifestation of what happens with software. It is totally unpredictable. So I'm talking, and mid-sentence, my computer goes into restart mode. And I'm like, I didn't hit anything. I didn't do anything. And then for me to come back in, it came up and it made me into a different person. So one of the people from IFPUG that's on our line who's watching, it came up with her name. So I don't know. So I apologize, but I'm back. And that, I think it just truly illustrates that software is not predictable. So I'm just going to say a little bit about this software development paradigms that really, this is one of the most confusing things for anybody that's not into software, period, is what are we talking about when we talk about spiral or waterfall or incremental or evolutionary? And I have to say, having been a software developer, oftentimes we do it to ourselves. We create these new terminologies, this new language, all of this stuff, and it really confounds not only the business, but cost estimators and everybody else to try and figure out what are we talking about. So what we did when we looked at the software development paradigms is we did a high level look at what's the difference between waterfall, because that's really used all the time now still, especially for safety critical software. We're still using waterfall. So from the 70s and 80s, then we started getting a little bit more formal, a little bit more iterative, and we came up with a V model, which you'll hear people talk about. Software cost estimators don't need to know this, but you need to know what are the cost implications of using a different methodology. So in the 90s, we started moving more towards an agile type thing. And then in 2001, the Agile Manifesto was written, which you may or may not have heard of. And that really is where the beginning of Agile started, which says we're going to value working software over documentation. We're going to value people over contracts. And there's a whole methodology behind it. The key thing is that Agile is only being used by a small portion of developers. And more likely, especially within the federal government in the US, in Malaysia, and all over Europe, and pretty much the world, is we have something that they either call Scrum Fall or they call there's a bunch of different names, which really says that we're doing a hybrid version of how we develop software. So we used to, waterfall, if you think about it, if you're not in software, waterfall is like designing a floor plan, going and taking a look at the building code, taking those two as an exact science and creating blueprints and elevation drawings, and then going through and starting to construct that way. That's waterfall. Agile says, you know what, we really don't know what we want. And we need to have a lot of change based on legislation and rules changes and things like that. So instead of laying a foundation and coming up with an exact floor plan, we're going to build it almost like a bunch of Lego blocks. We're going to find out what works. And instead of doing a deep dive on an area, we're going to really leave the scope open. We know what our end goal is. We know what our release should contain. We know what it's supposed to do eventually, but we may not know every single little function we need to have done. So that's a great thing. We've got a lot of advantages of using Agile. So where we are in most companies, and I'm not saying all, but most companies, is really somewhere in between.
Yeah.
So the software development paradigm is really to introduce you as a non-software person into what are the essential pieces and some of the terminology that people will throw at you. So if you ask for a software size and somebody says, well, we're using Kanban, what do you want? You need to know what that means. So we're really asking, what is the scope of what we're estimating when we're talking about software size? Okay. Next slide. So as Kevin said, we took a look at the GAO 12-step model. There was a Air Force 14-step model. There are other models around, and we said, you know what, let's consolidate this. Let's follow all of those methods, but let's really consolidate this into a 5-step estimation process. So the first thing we're going to do is, no matter, and this is for custom software development. That's really important, and I'll show you where this fits coming up. But we're talking about custom software development. So we want to figure out what is the purpose and scope of our estimate to begin with. You know, what are we estimating? Are we estimating phase one? Are we estimating an entire program? What are we estimating? From that, we develop a plan. We develop the cost estimation structure, which is kind of like a work breakdown structure. We want to understand the technical baseline and the basis of estimates. And we want to document the ground rules and assumptions. Now, these are things that are done in other types of estimates, but we want to make it formal so that we really can provide the context of somebody that gets our estimate will know what it actually means. And that's part of our problem. So the next step is to really collect, analyze, and normalize any historical data that we've got out there. So whether it's ice bags, whether it's the COCOMO, whether it is a commercial set of information or your own, what do we need to do to collect to make sure that we are having comparable historical data compared to what we're trying to estimate? Step 3 is to really create the software estimate. And the software estimate really includes multiple parts. It includes an estimate of the size From that, we do an estimate of the labor cost or the labor effort hours. So we take the size, we translate that through different techniques into an effort. From that, we translate it into cost, and we translate the effort into a schedule. So that's really what we're doing in step 3. And then we conduct sensitivity, risk, and uncertainty analysis, which for any cost estimators, you're already familiar with those parts. And we want to make sure we're doing cross-checks. That's extremely important. And then the last step is to really document and present the estimate to stakeholders, make sure that we've got everything into context. So if somebody picks up the estimate and I'm not there, they know what it means. So this is a consolidated kind of 5-step process, which takes the best of GAO and Navy and Air Force and international collaboration things. Next slide. So that's lesson 3. Then lesson 4, we get into, so lesson 3 is really what are the things you need to put into place. You know, lesson 2 says, how are we building this software? And it can range between, we're going to procure it, or we're going to buy it, and we're going to cobble it together, or we're going to develop it by custom. Lesson 3 says, okay, if we're doing custom software development, here's the steps we need to go through. Lesson 4, which builds on it, says, okay, how do we actually do that? So we've got 4 fundamental software cost estimating techniques. We've got the parametric, which is based on a derived CER, or cost estimating relationship. We've got a parametric that's based on a published CER like COCOMO 2 or the upcoming COCOMO 3. We've got an analogy approach. And then we've got wideband Delphi expert opinion. And we've got a lot of technical information that goes into it. And these are the types of things that we test is really, you know, what's the relationship? And the key thing from this slide is that effort equals a constant, times size to an exponent. And we talk about the fact that we've got a diseconomy of scale. The larger the project you're working on, the larger the size. It's not going to be a linear relationship. It's going to be a 1.2 exponent relationship, which follows more of an S curve, if you've heard of that. So we'll go on to the next one. Then
just quickly point out that on the second row there, you can see the relationship between productivity and effort. They're basically inverses of each other. That's a key point to know. And I definitely recommend anyone getting into software estimating, because it's public, get to know the COCOMO equations. I know we're not recommending a tool, but it's easy. It's a good research process.
A good point, because the Beam Software Center for Software and Systems Engineering actually has a web tool that we've included in CEBoK-S that if you have no other tool, you can go into that with either lines of code or into it with function points and different flavors. So then we've got our 6 kind of core information. We've got lessons 1 through 6. And then we've got 3 peripheral ones that really apply across all of the different lessons. So we've labeled those as X, Y, and Z. So software size. Software size is one of the 2 major cost drivers behind software cost estimation. So size is really, really important. How big is the software that you're building, that you're going to touch, that you're going to procure? So we go through what are the different types of software size. We go through functional size, physical size in terms of lines of code. We go into the different flavors of function points, from IFPUG all average, indicative, the IFPUG 4.3.1. We go through simple function points. We also go through NESMA, we go through Cosmic, we go through use case points, we go through object points, we go through story points, and we go through source lines of code. So all of these things are explained so that when somebody presents you with a size estimate, you know what it actually means. So what are the types of software size? What are the associated units of measure? The relationship of size to effort, that it's not a linear. And we've got a couple of samples of the types of slides that are in Lesson X. So there's no expectation for cost estimators to become size experts. Think about it. We're doing a upfront estimate based typically on high-level requirements. Now, one of the things that we also advise is if we're going to do this right, we need to have better data collection. So that's where at the end of a project or end of a program, software development, you would want to go in and measure in terms of IFPUG function points or NASMA function points. You'd want to measure what did we actually produce, and then go back and say, what would the estimate been had we known that was the actual size? So we talk all about all of this type of thing, but software size is one of two major software cost estimation drivers. And the other one is productivity, which I believe is on the next slide. Where is my lesson Y? Somehow it's not in there. Well, lesson Y talks all about productivity and the fact that productivity is not a linear relationship. So we have an entire chapter or module based on productivity. So then we've got lesson Z, which is commercial estimating models. And you can see here, we've taken a look at COCOMO 2, and there's a variety of different COCOMO models that are out there. As I mentioned, there's a COCOMO 2 web tool that you can put numbers into, set the COCOMO parameters, and it will give you a high-level estimate, which is really useful for cross-checks. We also take a look at the Gallerith CERSIM, which is the software estimation model for software. We also take a look at the, what is that? The true planning, which used to be by price, and it's now by unison. And then we take a look at QSM SLIM model. Now, we have a case study, as I mentioned, where we do software sizing, and we take that software size, and then we run it through these 4 different software commercial tools. Now, there's other ones out there, but we wanted to be able to compare this. And I actually farmed out the review on that to each of the tool vendors' specific experts. So I had Brad Clark from COCOMO 2, he and Ray Madachi, who were the originators with Barry Beam of the COCOMO 2. They reviewed and went through that, made sure that we were correct on that. I had Karen McRitchie at Gallerith. I had Arlene Makovich at Unison. And then we had Keith Siako and Doug Putnam review it from QSM. So all of the results are vetted and correct according to the tool vendors themselves. So they actually filled out this table for me. Next slide. So the CEBoK-S coverage, and this is really, really important. Some people think, oh, all I need is CEBoK-S now in order to do all of my cost estimating. Well, that's not necessarily true. If you take a look at a work breakdown structure similar to the one I have on the left-hand side there, we've got a software-intensive program that goes through essentially 2 major phases. You've got the investment portion, where you've got the project and program management, you do the feasibility studies, you do the systems engineering, the project management, you may have business process re-engineering and change management. And then we actually get into the system development. So if I've got a software intensive program, I can't just develop software. I have to develop a system where it works together with hardware and software. And in terms of system development, that's really where we start doing a deep dive. So system development or system procurement. And when we procure a system, typically we've got the hardware side of it where we make and or buy it. And then we've got the software side of it. So an ERP system or a software as a service or something like that. So those 2 pieces, the system development, the software side of it, and the system procurement, the software side of it, that's where we're really providing a robust set of estimates. System integration, system level integration and test, and the system deployment, we don't cover that. That is outside the boundary of what we cover. And then the operations and support, we cover part of that for system sustainment. So it's important to know on the right-hand side, when you see this, the investment portion, we do not cover the sourcing or the business case or the governance. We cover the development and or procurement of those pieces of software. We do not cover system integration or deployment. So if you're doing a life cycle cost estimate that includes investment, planning, system integration, the deployment, and includes many more things other than just strict sustainment in terms of enhancements, then you're going to need to build on top of what we provide you with the guidance. So you're still going to need to add other things into your estimate. We go into what Brad Clark and Cheryl Jones at the Army did with a lot of their work in software sustainment. And they've done some really landmark work there. So we use theirs as a good basis for moving forward. So we've got equations for operations and support, which goes way beyond purely just maintenance and the 5 types of maintenance we have. So this gives you a little idea that CEBoK-S doesn't cover everything in a software-intensive program, but it covers the pivotal things for which we had no information before, and that people typically would just take 2 numbers, magically multiply them together, and end up with an estimate. And it's no wonder our estimates are often way under budget and way under schedule. Next slide. Do you want to take this one, Kevin?
Sure. So what is the software cost estimating certification? So as I mentioned, I took the test about 6 months ago, to a little over 6 months. You need 2 years of software cost related experience. You'll need to purchase the material with the CEBoK-S material. We've explained a lot of the reasons why it's good to have on your desktop so you can refer to it. But you do need that to take the test. And then we've kind of gone. Carol kind of went through the what CEBoK-S is, and I'm not going to go much further into that, but it identifies, we talked about the best practices, the different approaches, the tools, the techniques that are used. It covers software development, cost, and schedule estimating. It's also what you will want to study to take the test.
And
So,
what we've done with this
yeah,
is with the SCEC, with that 800 slides, you may say, oh my gosh, there's no way I will ever have time to study all that. Well, you're in luck, because Kevin Sincata and our team on the ICEAA board has said, you know what, that doesn't make any sense to have somebody study every little bit of that. So we've got way more information. It's almost like an encyclopedia. And then the salient parts of it, we've elevated, and that's put into this CEBoK-S training. So when you buy the CEBoK-S, you'll get absolutely everything. But when you take the training, we will go over the salient parts that you really need to use and really need to know to pass the SCEC exam.
So this gives the fee structure for the material. You're going to pass the test in the first time because you're going to be trained in it. So we're not going to worry about the exam retake. And then you'll want to join ICEAA. It's a little bit, I believe it's cheaper if you're a member of ICEAA. Right now, it's 60 multiple choice questions. Anyone interested, I recommend you take the exam now before they increase the threshold. It will continue to get more difficult. At least that's my sense. And then, like all the ICEAA certifications, that you get it for 5 years. We have a couple of links here that you can take a look at. We'll make this presentation available, so you can click on these links, or if you're an ICEAA member, you're probably familiar with this. And then we mentioned some trainers, which is basically for my work farms, and same with Carol. There are definitely ways to get trained. And I'll just say as a point, so I did go through the material. I probably did 2 modules a week, so it was maybe a month of study if you didn't need it. This is before training was available, but it seems like a lot of material, but it goes pretty quickly if you do self-study. Certainly, it would be even more efficient if you actually were trained. So some of those. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'll take this one. Is that okay?
Yeah, please do.
So the real impetus behind this is that software has an absolutely increasing impact on programs, and thus in the cost estimation acquisition world, where an F-35 years ago was 20% software and 80% hardware. It's actually reversed almost. And the impact of a minor software piece, for example, me doing this presentation and my system glitches, it can have major repercussions. So we've got in module 1, which is our kind of justification for SCEC and for CEBoK-S, which you may want to go through and actually look at and take to your management and say, hey, look, we are not trained. We only know enough to know that we don't know. And software is not a trivial exercise. I spoke at a conference, and I've mentioned this a few times. I spoke at a conference for the Pacific Northwest Software Quality Conference, and I presented this same information. I said, you know what, we need to have a formal, strategic, formal approach that is data founded to software cost estimation, and we need to use function points or a functional size or something that's going to give us a scope. And my reviewer said, Carol, you're crazy. It's trivial. There's nothing to it. And I said, are you kidding me? So I think we've got to overcome the fact that these unnecessary consequences, if I underestimate a software project or program, I'm going to go into a contract less than zero. And it's going to cause litigation, cancellation, overruns, over-optimism, mistrust. If I can go in and say, look, the data shows me this is what it should cost, I'm in a much better position. And then we can finish on time and on budget when we start with a good estimate. So it provides us with a professional, proven, and relevant body of knowledge for cost estimators worldwide. And it's just basic knowledge for CEBoK-S. Hopefully, if we can get a quick start on this, it will provide career advancement. We need the management of the world and the management in federal governments to say, we need to do a better job of software cost estimation. And then we can supply the certificate holders. On to you, Ken.
I think that's, oh, no, I'm sorry, no. So next steps, purchase your copy of CEBoK-S. It's comprehensive. We talked about that, and base knowledge for all estimators. You can coordinate training at your company agency. We recommend you contact ICEAA. It can be done in a couple days. Take the test sooner rather than later. There's an excellent question exam bank. It's available to everyone. We want to basically rising tide floats all boats. The more people that are CCEA or PCEA, SCEC just expands the value of their profession. And again, it's going to create software development success. It'll create more accurate estimates following a data proven, a data founded approach, if I should say, data driven approach. And then if you're interested in even going beyond that, you can also volunteer the software SIG that we're a part of, seeking volunteers both for curriculum and marketing, and making SCEC really a major thing going forward. Carol, why don't you take this? You were more involved.
Sure. And as I mentioned, we had a lot of people participating. I coordinated a team of over 20 people, and there's a few people that I'd like to call out, like Kevin Sincata and Dave Brown were my senior advisors and reviewers. Rick Collins was the ICEAA president. Megan Jones. Megan, you were just, you kept us in line because we had this absolutely massive, ambitious thing to be everything to all people, and she kind of reeled us in, and I thank her for that. And we had a CEBoK-S review group that consisted of Jennifer Kirchhoffer, who's on our board, Dr. Wilson Rosa, who does a lot of work with developing CERs for DHS CAD, Dan French, who is with Quebec Consulting. He also has been an avid and active member of IFPUG, so he kind of kept us in line in terms of IFPUG, and that was great. And as I said, we have one of the most robust case studies in anywhere that uses both IFPUG, NESMA, Cosmic, object points, use case points, and things like that. We had Arlene Makovich of Unison, Denise Nelson of Boeing, Dr. Sanath from Sirius in the UK, Dr. Christian Smart, Eric and Harold from NESMA, and Brian Glauser. And there were a cast of other people who reviewed different pieces, like I mentioned. This was our ISRG major group, And then there were a lot of other people from NESMA and Cosmic and IFPUG that I called on for expertise and specific things. And even the Agile Alliance was useful as well. So it was intended to be an inclusive endeavor that looked at everybody and everybody's opinion in terms of software cost estimation and functional sizing. So it was my dream job, even though it was challenging. It was a dream job during COVID, and working with the people at ICEAA and everybody that's within the communities. I just want to say thank you for entrusting me with the confidence and the expertise to pull this off. Kevin, you're on mute. Next slide. Kevin, you're still on mute. Anyways, this is the end of our presentation. And the last slide has our contact information. Can you advance
That's all
this?
right. I'll fix that for the recording and the future. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We're really excited about CEBoK-S, and we're really excited about getting a bunch of you guys certified in this to show off how ICEA members are the best of the best in the industry. So it seems that we did not have any questions, so you must have impressed everyone into silence. So with a little extra time, maybe we can recover some ourselves before our next meetings. Thank you, everybody, once again. And Carol, I'll let you do the final words.
I would just say that this is something where we really need your help. I spoke at the Kokomo 3 conference last week, and I opened it up. I said, what is it that we need to convince management that software cost estimation and that cost estimating is a valid profession? Because I don't think necessarily the management of the world really realizes how important this is. And you can't just take two numbers, add them together, multiply them by something, and take the lunar cycle and hope that this is going to give us better software development. No. The one little thing I'll mention is that in one of the modules that we didn't go over actually has a flow chart that says, how are you going to build your software? Is it going to be software as a service? Is it going to be glue code? Is it an ERP? Are we going to use RICE FW? So we've got a lot more information that we just didn't have time to go over today. And I'd like to say thank you to everybody who's here. I have a paper that I wrote that I sent to the Pacific Northwest Software Quality Conference that I'd be happy to send out to anybody who's interested. And I want to say thank you to Megan and to ICEAA for allowing Kevin and I to present. And we're both amongst a cast of silent people. We're really excited to make this happen for ICEAA, for IFPUG, for the measurement community, and for the world.
Yeah, I think I'm finally unmuted. I just want to thank everybody for joining. And then also I'd like to give a shout out to Carol. Great work with CEBoK-S. This is really a kind of a career-defining body of knowledge. And thank you for ICEAA for giving the opportunity to speak today, and specifically Megan.
Well, thanks everyone. Thank you guys. Have a great one, and we'll see you on our next webinar. Take care.